Governor, the House voted I guess it was yesterday, on cuts to the continuing resolution, the national budget. And as I understand it, they could be making cuts again and again over the next 6 weeks or something like that. And I was talking to some people from Community Action Council groups who are very concerned that that they might be on that hit list sometime soon, because, as you know, President Obama has endorsed some cuts to those programs which originated with Johnson's War on Poverty in 1964. And I'm just wondering, whether or not you've directed your administration to look at contingency plans, or whether or not you have any concerns about this year's budget, because the state might see a rather large hole in some of these programs that really support the 55,000 or so really poor Vermonters here.
Well, from the President of the United States on down, we're all concerned about the approach to budgeting being taken by the Republicans in Congress. And Vermonters have every reason to be concerned. The irony is, if you accepted all of the cuts that have been proposed by the Republicans in Congress, it would affect 12% of our budget deficit. 12%. So there's more politics going on here than there is budget balancing. Let's be honest about this. It's a way for them to go after programs for low-income Americans. It's a way for them to go after women's health care through Planned Parenthood. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can see what's going on. What we're trying to do is build coalitions to work with the president, because he's very concerned about this, to ensure that the toughest cuts for Vermont don't happen. Now, what do I mean by that? The New England governors all are going to work hard to protect the money that helps us low-income Vermonters have access to whales so they don't freeze in their homes. Now, we looked at each other and we said, well, we got to broaden the base. So I went and spoke with the governor of Illinois, who's very concerned about that. So we're going to partner with the Midwestern governors to try to get a message out that, we're cold states, that when a tornado or a natural disaster whips through the South, federal dollars comes in emergency help. No one asks, well, should we give them emergency help? They have these patterns from weather that is requiring them to have some emergency help to clean up after a real mess. Well, we don't control really cold weather either here. And in effect, our natural disasters are really cold winters for low-income Vermonters and Mainers and New Hampshireites and New Yorkers. So we're trying to work together, and folks in Illinois and Iowa. So we're trying to work together with some of the other cold states to make sure that those LIHEAP cuts don't happen. Now, on the broader front, I think that obviously there's some politics going on, but that when push comes to shove, the president's confident that he's going to be able to, as he says, land the plane, work with these folks to do smart budgeting without devastating America. And the goal is, and it's his goal too, to move from too much federal spending, deficits that we know we have to get under control, but that was necessary, prudent, and wise in averting the worst economic downturn in America. And let's not forget, the president reminded us just 2 years ago, the governors were sitting around with him wondering, what can we do to make sure that the financial system in America doesn't collapse, and therefore the world financial system doesn't collapse. That was sort of a big one. And they all agreed, federal stimulus money to states. You hear all these governors, Republican governors, Tea Party governors, complaining about the spending. And you get one of them to tell you privately, hey, we wish the federal money hadn't come our way. Not one of them will say that privately, not one. So the question for the president, for all of us, is how do we make the transition from a policy that worked, that saved us from a financial meltdown, that brought us from the worst recession in American history to signs that we're in recovery, and how do we make the transition from that fragile recovery to robust job growth and balance the budget? The president wants to do it, we all want to do it, but you don't do it by kind of jumping off a cliff. You have to do it in a smart, common sense way, and that's not what Congress is proposing.
Well, except that the president is proposing pretty much a 50% cut in funding for the community service block grants. So I guess I'm wondering for fiscal year 2012 whether or not you're going to be doing any planning around that, because that's a pretty significant
Right.
cut, even if the House stuff doesn't happen.
You know, the bad news is that there is not enough money in Vermont pockets to replace all of the money the Republican Congress is talking about cutting. So we've got to work very aggressively to make sure that their dreams aren't fulfilled, that they don't pass budgets that are going to destroy Vermont and a lot of other states in this fragile recovery as we try to create jobs and grow Vermonters' incomes. But there is no contingency plan that could fill the gap between what they're talking about and the effects on Vermont. It's just the financial chasm.
Do you get any sense from the president or people around him how he views this dynamic in the House of Representatives, where you have the Tea Party, newly elected Tea Party members, and then some House leadership that may not want to go as far as the Tea Party wants to go, and yet they may be pushed into positions that could end up with these cuts that you're talking about. How does he have a sense of how to finesse that politically? Did you talk to him about that?
We did, and I think he does. And he understands that for a few weeks here, they're gonna have to make a lot of noise about all the things they talked about in their campaigns. He also fully understands that he is a pen, a veto pen. He's a Democratic Senate. He has a bunch of Republican leaders, frankly, who aren't as extreme as the membership. So I think in the end, common sense will prevail. And that's what the American people want. I think it's worth mentioning that, Governor Scott Walker didn't show up this week. Now, according to recent polls, 60% of Americans think that removing the basic right of collective bargaining is not the right thing to do. It's un-American. And I think that as they get out there with some of their more extreme plans, they might find that, like Vermonters, the American people think common sense and compromise makes more sense than ideological right-wing politics.
You mentioned No Child Left Behind. What are you looking at, some examples of what you're looking for in the news version?
Well, it seems to me there are 3 or 4 real problems with the current bill. The first is that it forces teachers to teach to a standardized test instead of teaching subject matter that kids need to succeed and be a part of the trained workforce for job growth in the 21st century. And we see this time and time again. There's a real difference between teaching to a standardized test and teaching. The second problem is it forces teachers or their aides to fill out endless paperwork that wasn't required before No Child Left Behind. We're all paying for that. That's driving school budgets. It's driving property taxes. I don't think it's doing much to improve the quality, the outcomes that we also badly want to improve. And I think the third piece is it fails schools who have either high percentage of low-income kids or a high percentage of kids who speak English as a second language. We see that happening in Berlin. So why take principals who are qualified but happen to have the toughest, most challenging kids to teach and tell them they're failing when they're often doing their jobs? So those are 3 off the top of my head. There are more. The point is, No Child Left Behind has left too many kids behind, and it hasn't worked. Let's admit when something has failed and find a better way.
You keep the pressure on those schools to perform, to have, improved performance among their students? I mean, do you
Sure,
feel you
and
need
we're not
legislation to do that? Or?
Sure, and I don't think anyone's saying, throw it all out the window and come back with better ideas. I think what we're all saying is, listen, what we did isn't working. Let's come up with better ideas, and that's what Arnie Duncan and the president are asking us to help them do, and I think we can do it. I still say that this is really important. Every week I go out and talk to employers. I visit businesses. And the first questions I ask of the people who are running those businesses, how can I help you grow jobs one job at a time? And almost every time, among the things they say to me that would help is, we got jobs. We have jobs. We have jobs in engineering. We have jobs in math that require math skills. We have jobs in computers, technology. And we can't find enough workers coming out of schools in Vermont to do those jobs. Now, that's a real problem. But No Child Left Behind isn't doing anything to help us solve that problem. It is the job of government to close the gap between the employers who have jobs and the Vermonters who want to do those jobs. And we have to do a better job. No one denies that. But let's get on it. Let's focus on it. It's math. It's technology. It's engineering. We know what we got to do.
So if we need a new title, any suggestions?
Well, let's first get the substance right, then we can worry about me. Remember,
Doug.
I promised you this administration, less big titles, more action.
Yes, fewer big titles.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for
Let me
joining.
just,
Sure.
are you comfortable with the level of the teacher's retirement plan?
Well, you know, the point I keep making about the progress we've made there is we're making progress. You know, by bringing people to the table collectively to solve problems, we've made some big inroads. As you know, last year we negotiated an agreement with the union to save $15 million annually ongoing. As you know, the state employees took a 3% pay cut 2 years in a row. Listen, that's big. You go find me how many states you can find where public employees came to the table and collaboratively said, we want to help you solve this problem. As you know, they've made some retirement concessions that we're working on. So, is there more work to do? Sure, there's no question there's more work to do. But I'm proud of the progress we've made.